So all the clips you're seeing right now were color graded using a plugin called Dehancer. That grain, halation, and those little imperfections that make film so special, that's exactly what Dehancer helps recreate. So I'm not expert with DaVinci Resolve or color grading, but I've been using it for over a year now, mostly with almost all my YouTube videos. You know, slowly I'm becoming a little bit more familiar with it. I think like most artists and most visual artists, I think we tend to try to emulate what we see. That a lot of times means film and movies and any type of film photography or cinematography. You know, you're scrolling through Pinterest and we see a really cool looking screen cap from a movie. And I think for me, it's more about the rich colors, subtle green that you get with film. Sometimes the halation, you know, that soft look without really, you know, losing the crispiness from the image. But if you color grade at some extent, you tend to realize that it's really hard. It's really hard, and it takes a lot of time to even color grade one image, especially if, like, for example, me, I get a lot of different clips that I'm trying to put together for a video, and it might be different lighting, temperature, and it's kind of hard going through each image and going through that whole process of trying to make a really well color graded video. So I was really excited when Dehancer reached out to me and asked me if I would make a review for them, particularly about their plugin for DaVinci Resolve. And I'm very excited because I had heard from other YouTubers and other colorists on YouTube that Dehancer was a very good plugin for film emulation specifically. So I've been using Dehancer for the past month or so, and I've been, you know, trying to figure out the plugin, all of its features. That it has a lot, and we're gonna touch on those features in a bit. But, you know, there's so much more to learn, and obviously I'm no expert when it comes to this, but I thought it would be very cool, yeah, if I just showed you a little bit about my process when it comes to using the Dehancer film emulation plugin, and, you know, trying to see if it's something that you like, or if you could pick up any type of tips along the way. So yeah. Alright, so I'm going to share with y'all a little bit of the process that I go through when using Dehancer. I am currently using Dehancer Pro 7.3. So there's actually a lot of ways you can go about this, from changing your footage, you know, from looking very flat to what it would look like brought back up a little. So one way to do that is using the color space transform, which is what I usually do. But Dehancer Pro does have the option to, you know, bring back your video to what it should be. So here's my first node, and we're just gonna place that on that one. Might take a bit. So here's where we can transform our video. So here it has all of these options. We're gonna go to choose camera. Then obviously I'm gonna choose Sony because it's the camera I use, but you choose your camera. And here I'm going to choose A7iii and S-Log2 gamut because that's what I did. So obviously you can see here it brought our image from looking pretty flat to its standard video. But I'm going to do it a little differently because I think, in my personal opinion, I've seen a little bit of difference when I go through my normal process before, rather than just placing my my camera through its input here. I think it affects the shadows a little bit in a way that I don't like, so I don't usually go, you know, immediately with Dehancer, especially for my color transformation. I'm not gonna do that, but it is an option for if you want to use that. But I'm not going to do that, so I'm actually going to reset my node now. And usually my process, it goes something like creating 4 nodes, and I'm going to name these. So my first one I call WB meaning white balance. My second one is going to be called exposure. My third one is my color space transform. So you can put color space transform. And then this one is going to be the Dehancer. So, all right, so once you have these, I like to go in with my color space transform just so I can get, you know, bring back my video to what it should be. So here I'm gonna choose, would be S gamut, S log 2, and then I'm gonna go to Reg 709, and then Reg 709A. All right, so you can tell obviously that brought back the video to what it should look like. And then we can go into, you know, the rest of it. So usually what you want to do when you're color grading is get a clip that pretty much encapsulates the lighting from your image. So here I like to use this little drop picker, I think it's called, but it's basically for white balance. So you click that and you want to click it on what should be the lightest part of your image. So here, I don't know, I didn't really like it, but obviously you can go in by yourself and correct that. So I'm gonna make it a little, I'm gonna put it right around there. Yeah, I think I like that. For my exposure, I like to go a little bit with the curve tool and just bring that down a little bit, you know, to what I think looks pretty well. Obviously, this is dependent on what you consider is good for your image. For example, here, it's a little bit of like a backlit side light on the plants. So for the highlights, I'm actually gonna bring just a tad bit down. So obviously you can see your standard S curve right here, but it's not as harsh or dramatic. That is something else I recommend. Don't be so dramatic with your corrections when it comes to color grading. I think that you can ruin your image very quickly if you do that. But here I'm going to just go very slightly a little darker on my shadows, and for the highlights, I'm gonna leave it right there. So then we have those corrections. So we have our white balance, our exposure, and obviously our color transform. And now it's time for the Dehancer plugin, which is this little option right here, and it should just say Dehancer Pro. So you're just gonna drag and drop that onto your image. And since we already did the color space transform onto our video, we're just gonna leave it at Reg 709. And this is when we can start to have a little bit of fun. Basically, there's a lot of options when it comes to the Dehancer Pro, but if you want, you can just close all of these options just so it isn't, you know, so overwhelming, and we can go one step at a time. I will say you might want to, from the get-go, take off the grain just because it's a little distracting when you're actually color grading a little bit, and then you can add it, you know, afterwards. So here I think is the two biggest things that are very helpful from the Dehancer Pro. You have your print and your film. So for print, they have these 5 options, which, you know, obviously I'm not an expert again, but I kind of choose whichever one feels like the best option for the video I have. So sometimes I go with the Kodak 2383, and then sometimes I go with the Fujifilm 3513 film print. For now, I think I want to choose the 2383. I think that's a good option. Then here on our film, this is where we have all the film emulation options. So you have various types of what would be like types of film. Me specifically, I've so far really liked using the Kodak Gold 200. I've liked the Kodak Ektar 100. I've liked the Kodak Portra 400. And I've also really liked the Kodak Vision 350D, as well as the Konica Minolta VX400 Super. Obviously, they have many more, and I guess you choose what you want to emulate, but for this image specifically, I think I really want to go with, I'll go with the Kodak Gold 200. I feel like it's the most natural looking when it comes to, you know, the film here. And then the next part where I would usually go is the exposure, because I want to be able to see what the image is going to look like a little bit more. You'll see all the way to the top here in input the exposure. I heard somewhere, and I'm pretty sure I saw it in a video that Dehancer actually has up on their YouTube channel, that actually using your exposure on the print would give you a little bit what would be more realistic to the film you're trying to emulate. So we're going to take this option and we're gonna bring, you know, get our exposure to our liking from the print option. So for this video specifically, I think I actually like the exposure how I had it, but I'm just gonna put it a little bit down. Usually my next option would be the tonal contrast, which I feel like mostly affects what would be the shadows. So I like to crush my shadows a little bit or bring them back up a little bit, just a tad bit where it's like, you know, natural enough. And then usually I go to the target white, which if you can see, I'll bring it all the way over here. That gives, you know, a very warm look, and then on the other side it's a very cool look. So I usually try to stick to the warmer highlights just because I feel like that gives a little bit more of a filmic look. Then that's when I would go all the way to input and finally, you know, start working with my exposure. And here, I guess it really depends on the person, but here for this specifically, I'm just gonna bring it up a little. And then we have our temperature, which again, very warm, very cool. Again, I think I'm gonna go warm because it's like a very, I guess we can try to make it like a golden hour type video. And then here we have the tint, which, you know, green, pinkish like. Here I like to balance it out to the skin tone specifically, since we do have skin tone here. So if you bring it all the way to the green, that mixes a lot with the colors behind it, and I just personally don't like that. So I like to bring back a little bit of those pinks that we usually have in our skin tone. So just a tad bit, I don't do a lot. And then here we have the film option. You can, you know, push or pull. And then usually I go to this option, which is the film developer. We're gonna enable that. So here I usually like to just use the color boost and bring that up so you can be as exaggerated as you want. For example, me, I'm going to exaggerate a little bit just because I like to have those really rich colors. So obviously you can tell the difference in the saturation here. Then I think this is one of the best options they have, which would be the film compression. I really like this just because of what it does with the highlights. So we're gonna enable that. If you see on screen, you can obviously see the difference of what it does to the highlights. It, in a way, compresses them a little bit, but it gives you that very cohesive feel to your image, which I personally really like. So you can go in here and, you know, you can see the difference, bring back the white point. Usually I do bring back the white point just enough. And then you have your tonal range. And here specifically, it really also depends on your image, but here I'm gonna leave it around there, which is around the middle. And then here we have the expand option. Also remember to enable your features. So here on, obviously black point is going to affect your blacks. I'm going to leave it around there. Then you have your white point, which again, oh, that was crazy. I'm going to bring back up the whites just a tad bit, and then, you know, we can skip over the print because we already did that. And then you have your color head, which again, we're gonna enable that. And you know, this goes through your colors a little bit. So you have your yellow, blue. I'm going to take this image a little yellow just to give that film look again. Then you have your magenta green. Here also, it just depends on your image, I think. But I am going to go just a tad bit green, since we had already brought up a little bit of the pink from the skin with this temperature. I'm going to take the green a little bit here. Just a tad bit. And then you have your cyan red. And again, I think, you know, especially when you have skin tone, you just really want to balance out what would be your skin tone, you know, leaving it as natural as possible. But here I'm gonna go a little bit to the reds just because of the skin tone here on the hand. And then usually I don't get into any of these, to be honest with you. I'm not such the biggest fan of them, but here we finally get to the film green, so we're gonna enable that. And you know, you have all these options, and I usually like to stick to this option right here, which isn't a lot of green, but also because I'm not such a big fan on green in video. I am for photos, surprisingly, but not for video. So and then here we have halation, which you can see the difference on and off, and you know, you get to control it here. And then you have your bloom, which we can also enable that and control. I like to keep it around here, which is like a third, and you can see the difference right here. And then here obviously you have film damage. I'm not such a fan, but obviously it depends on the look you're trying to go for. Film breath, overscan, vignette, and personally I don't like to get into a lot of those options. Sometimes I don't like to push the saturation on this node so much, specifically here in the Dehancer, because sometimes I feel like I do want a little bit more of color. I usually make another node, which also, to make a node, you just press Option S. And then here on my node, I usually go down here to saturation on my color wheels and just, you know, saturate it to my liking, which usually is a lot. And there you have it. There is one of the ways you can use Dehancer Pro film emulation. So obviously that was my process specifically just for that video. I think it definitely changes depending on, you know, the type of video you have and the lighting and your settings and your own preferences when it comes to color grading. But I definitely think that Dehancer has its pros and cons. So the pros first. I really like the different options that they have for film emulation. I think they have a great variety when it comes to different types of colors and different types of film. Also, one of my favorite parts of all of their features is definitely the film compression. I think that just like mind-blowing what it does to your image. I really like that. Obviously, there are different options when it comes to film grain, their halation and their bloom. I think it really comes in handy. Obviously, I know that DaVinci Resolve specifically has these options as well when it comes to like the glow options and the light rays, but I think that Dehancer does a really good job when it comes to emulating the halation and bloom from what would be real film. Now the cons, obviously you can't expect it to take your color grading skills from like 0 to 10 just by using Dehancer. Obviously, you know, you need your own process and you need to learn the basics at least a little bit. I think one con for me, and it might just be me, I might have the wrong settings too, but one of the cons for me was definitely the color space transform option it has here. And I think, I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like it definitely does something when it comes to the shadows and the really dark parts of your image. I'm just not the biggest fan of that, so I don't really use it in that way. Besides that, I don't really have that many bad things to say about this plugin. And by the way, they did not pay me in any way to, you know, say anything about their program, but genuinely I think it's helped me a lot with color grading and the color grading process. I think it becomes a little bit overwhelming, especially if you're a newbie like me when it comes to color grading, but you know, mixing in what I already know and how easy they make it to get to the point that I wanted to get to with just, you know, the normal DaVinci Resolve features. I think Dehancer really does a great job making it easy, making it really well made features, and I think it's great that they also made it for various other programs, you know, color grading programs, as well as, you know, having the option to work with various cameras and such. So really that's just, you know, my overall opinion. You know, another thing as well, I've also found out about their app, which if you don't know about their app, definitely try it. I think it's a really good way to, you know, test the waters. Also, what type of results you can get with the Dehancer plugin when it comes to DaVinci Resolve. Basically, it's the same process that you would go through on your computer. You also have it on your phone, which I think is really great. For example, me, I love taking video of every single moment. At specific times, I can't have my camera, so the only option I have is my phone, and I've really liked using the Dehancer app so far. I've used the Lightroom app as well for video editing, and I will say, I think, well, I won't get into all the details, but I definitely think that Lightroom Mobile is definitely a little better than the Dehancer app for video editing, but it gets really close. And so far I've liked it, and it has a lot of options that the Lightroom video editing app doesn't have. For example, what would be like the halation and bloom. I'm pretty sure you don't have those options on Lightroom, but on the Dehancer app you do, which I think is very cool. Still keeps the video at very good quality, which I think is great. And yeah, I just wanted to share that with y'all. So my final thoughts on Dehancer. I think for anyone looking to make their color grading process a little easier, you know, trying to get good results a little bit quicker. Obviously, you still need to put effort into learning its features and, you know, making up your own process when it comes to color grading. But I think for anybody who just really wants to, you know, get close to that film look without making it so tedious, I think it's definitely a great option for you. I think it's also very easy to integrate. If you're already someone who uses DaVinci Resolve or any other, you know, color grading program, I think it's very easy to include Dehancer in your process and to any node. Really, I think it's very easy to integrate into any workflow. So I just want to say a huge thank you to the Dehancer team for reaching out and letting me use this plugin, which I've completely enjoyed so far. And you can also use it, and if you decide to make any purchase, you can always use my code JOY10 to get 10% off. I'll see you next time.